Welcome to your Fifth Floor podcast. I'm David Amanor, and today we're talking about Cameroon with BBC Africa's Peter Tarr. Peter lives in Bamenda, the city where protests first began about the dominance of the French language in the legal and education system of Cameroon's two English-speaking regions. That was in 2016. Last year, it escalated into an armed conflict between separatists who want their own independent country and soldiers sent in by the central government in Yaoundé to quell the rebellion. The violence is taking an increasing toll on civilians, and it's something Peter is seeing firsthand. Recently, he came across the bodies of 4 young men shot dead in his neighborhood.
It's difficult to know how to remain safe in Bamenda or to stay alive. We are not only living in fear, but we are really traumatized by what we are witnessing here in Bamenda. Death, I would say, is lurking on the streets, and abandoned corpses are easy to come by. The image of these 4 boys shot dead by security forces just about 200 meters away from where I live has stuck with me. They were ordinary boys in my neighborhood who unfortunately were caught smoking marijuana, an activity which is normally associated with separatist fighters by the security forces. Some of them did manage to escape, but the 4 boys were hit by bullets, and unfortunately for them, they died.
Did you know these boys personally?
I mean, I've chatted with at least a few of them. When I saw the pictures emerging later on, I realized that, these are boys I knew. Guys who tend to smoke marijuana, they always have these nice stories to tell, and so people knew these boys, and they were very lively boys as well.
But if these youths had been, say, smoking marijuana on the streets of Yaoundé, the capital in French-speaking Cameroon, where normalcy is, they wouldn't be shot dead, would they?
I just have a feeling, David, that they wouldn't be shot dead. These boys were particularly targeted because they found themselves in the restive English-speaking regions.
You've written about living in fear. You've described a situation where any man can be suspicious for a lot of different reasons. Yes,
personally I've been stopped a couple of times, probably because I fall in the category of people who look suspicious because I'm muzzled, I'm stout.
You're well built.
Yeah, I'm well built. The logic of the security forces is that if you're well built, then the chances of you being a fighter are greater. You know, it attracts undue attention as you move on the streets. And in the face of such paranoia, I would say many people have been killed because they looked suspicious. Not because they were criminals or rebels or separatist fighters, but just because they looked suspicious.
Have you decided to curtail your gym activity or your workouts?
I've not been to the gym in 2 months now. First of all, it isn't safe to be on the streets. And secondly, I'm actually kind of afraid that I could be associated with someone who's preparing to take up arms against the state. So I just prefer to do my workouts in my house.
Presumably then, if you look thin or slender, you're safe.
I think all the same, you're still perceived as someone who poses a threat to the security forces because slender or lean people are thought to have been living in the bush and don't have proper food, generally look emaciated. You're likely to either be killed or harassed or arrested, to say the least.
Does that mean that day-to-day dress codes in Bamenda have changed? I mean, what do you need to be aware of to stay alive?
I think people have become very cautious of what they wear, just as they are careful about what they say in the public. There are no predefined rules about how people should dress, but you don't want to dress in a way that can cause the security forces to associate you with the pro-independence fighters or the separatist fighters, if you like. So if you're wearing a combination of red and black, maybe putting on a red bandana, a bangle, that's likely going to raise an alarm with the security forces because in the past, separatist fighters have been found to be dressed this way. I mean, parents have literally been begging their children to not dress in ways that are unusual, pleading with their children not to look shabby, not to keep long hairs, because long hairs, again, are associated with people who've been in the bush for long and don't have a means to have haircuts.
And when you say long hair, do you mean dreadlocks?
Yeah, dreadlocks, they fall in that category, but also people who just have natural hairs that have overgrown are also seen as people who've been in the bush for long and could be fighters.
So this is serious. If I'm in Bamenda today and I don't want to get shot, don't wear dreadlocks, don't wear an afro, don't be too slim and don't be too muscular. and stay away from the color red. Is that right?
Yes, which is really kind of difficult because people just want to be themselves, isn't it? People want to dress the way they want. People want to keep their heads how they want them to be. But this, unfortunately, cannot be the case again. You have to adjust in order to stay alive. In some ways, you have to change who you are. You know, people's personalities are being affected just because there is an ongoing crisis and because security forces treat people who dress in certain ways differently from how they would treat others.
Out on the streets of Bamenda, is it obvious who the rebels are?
There were times that the separatist fighters, David, were very obvious on the streets. You could easily spot them on the streets and in the neighborhoods. But in Bamenda City, it is not too common to see them, probably because of the heavy militarization. But when you start to move to the outskirts of the city of Bamenda in towns like Bafut, Bambili, Bello, and Kumbu, then you start coming across roadblocks mounted by the separatist fighters, and then you have this awareness that, you know, they are really present here. And in most cases, you see them coming from the bushes to stop vehicles and to control them. I've been stopped once, and, you know, they carry these den guns and shotguns, and wherever they are found, that place or area then becomes a potential target of a military raid. And in such raids, civilians suffer more. Their houses are burned and arbitrary arrests are carried out. So it's really difficult when you have them very obvious on the street.
And what are the dangers for you as a reporter when you're moving out of the city? You've got the soldiers on one side, you've got the rebels on the other. What do you do? Do you walk down the middle? What are the dangers? What are the fears, maybe?
As a journalist, you don't know how to conduct yourself. Maybe you could get shot because you're mistaken for a separatist fighter, or a separatist fighter could mistake you for an informant for the security forces. And sometimes also when you are impartial in your reporting, representing the facts as they are, the military wouldn't like it when you give the accounts as they are. Separatist fighters are not also happy. They feel that you have to report in a way that favors them. So as a journalist, going to the field is always something you are careful about. You have to think twice and think really well before you put yourself in a situation where you could be risking your life.
Bamenda used to be a city of almost 500,000 people, but a lot of people have left and a lot of people have sent their children outside now. What about you? Will you leave?
We're on the edge in Bamenda, and I don't really know what to expect, David. The crisis has affected every aspect of my life. Part of my family actually has relocated to a safer city. But for me, I have to stay in Bamenda. I've built my life in this city, and I think that I have to stay in spite of the escalation of this crisis. But what I need to do is to make sure that I stay safe, and everyone else in the city is adopting measures to stay safe.
Peter Tarr in Bamenda. Peter reports out of Cameroon for BBC Africa. Before you go, if you like your audio on the go, try the Outlook podcast from the BBC World Service. Each episode centres around a powerful personal story. We've got Lisa Brennan Jobs, the daughter of Steve Jobs. She spoke to Outlook about their awkward and complicated relationship. Just search Outlook wherever you found this podcast. From the Fifth Floor team for now, I'm David Amanor.